The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. When someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other one as well. If anyone wants to go to law with you over a tunic, hand over your cloak as well. Should anyone press you into service for 1 mile, go for 2 miles. Give to the one who asks of you, and do not turn your back on one who wants to borrow. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your heavenly Father. For he makes his sun rise on the bad and the good, and causes rain to fall on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what will your recompense be? Do not the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brothers only, what is unusual about that? Do not the pagans do the same? So, be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect." The Gospel of the Lord. A few years ago, I was teaching CCD to high school students, and I was teaching a lesson on parables. And I wanted to find some video clips from the parables, so I went rummaging through my movies and thought of the movie Godspell. Godspell is based upon the Gospel of Matthew, and that's full of parables. So I popped the DVD into my player and started scanning through things. And you know how it is when you start scanning a DVD. You're looking for one thing, but you're seeing all those other things that catch your attention. And I came across one of my favorite songs from that show. It's called "It's All for the Best." Now that song is about all the things that can go wrong in our lives. But instead of it being a slow and drawn-out dirge of a song, and it's an upbeat Dixieland kind of thing. Because the theme of the song is no matter what goes on in our lives, we have God. And with God, we should be filled with joy, because all these things that bother us today are nothing when it comes to the promises that he has for us. So the players in this movie are spreading the word, right? They're taking this song and they're singing it throughout the city. We see them singing in Central Park, and then singing in Harlem, and down on Wall Street, and finally they're shouting from the rooftops. We can see them singing on the rooftops and doing their little dance and the New York City skyline in the background. And as the camera pulls away, we see that the building that they're on is the second tower of the World Trade Center. And this is 1971, and that Trade Center building hasn't even been finished construction yet. So I'm looking at the Trade Center, and it fades from the scene, and the next scene that we see, the people are down in the courtyard between the two buildings. And the first line of dialogue is, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Now, I don't know if you're anything like me, but I've studied what Jesus has to say, and sometimes when you hear what Jesus is expecting of us, you can understand it. It touches your heart immediately. You know what God is looking for. You know what you need to do. You can see how it applies in your situation in the very moment, and you do whatever you can to live out those words. But sometimes you think about something that Jesus says, and you just don't have context for it. So it becomes a matter of the brain instead of a matter of the heart. I had heard about love your enemies, and I thought, yeah, I can understand that. I see the logic in that kind of statement. But at the time, I wasn't concerned about enemies. So I didn't really understand what it means to live that out. But then seeing the World Trade Center and hearing the words, love your enemies, now you have context. Now you can understand how hard it is, the things that Jesus is asking us to do. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now I think Jesus knows how hard it is. All through the last couple of weeks, we've been hearing him say, you've heard it said, but I'm going to tell you it's really like this. He's taken the law that we heard from Moses and bringing it up a notch, raising the bar. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. And he knows he's raising the bar. Look at the last line of that gospel passage. So, be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect. So not only do we have these tough sayings, but the expectation is that we're going to be like God. Now that's a high bar. And that's a bar that we can't reach on our own. A couple of weeks ago, we were honored to have in our presence somebody who spoke about what it means to reach for that bar and achieve that kind of perfection, perfect love, perfect compassion, and perfect mercy. We had a survivor from the Rwandan genocide speaking to us, Immaculée. And her story starts when she leaves college to come home from Easter break, just as the violence begins in that country. And her father knows that their family is in trouble. See, their family is from the tribe that's being persecuted. So he hands Immaculée a rosary and pushes her out of the house and sends her over to a neighbor's house for hiding, for safety. Now that neighbor is from the other tribe, the tribe doing the persecution. But these people were good friends. They trusted each other. He sent his daughter over to be safe. And the man receives her, hides her in a bathroom with 7 other women. Now these women are crammed into a 3x5 space, shoulder to shoulder, stuck there for 93 days. Immaculée went into that bathroom weighing 132 pounds. She came out weighing 68 pounds. Now try and put yourself into that situation for a moment. Imagine yourself crammed into this room for 93 days, shoulder to shoulder, no space to move, very little food to eat, and people running around outside looking for you, wanting to kill you. Your mind is filled with fear and anger. You're worried if you're never going to see your family again. And the boredom and the monotony is just making things scream out in your head. And she was going crazy. But she remembered she had that rosary. So she took out the rosary and began to pray. And she prayed rosary after rosary. And she found that for the moment, while she was in prayer, she was removed from the reality of the situation and was able to find a little bit of peace. So she just kept praying and praying and praying. She said like 28, 29 rosaries, and she filled the gaps with chaplets of the Divine Mercy. And she prayed these prayers over and over and over again. And she started counting how many prayers she would say in a given day. And she found that she estimated 300 Our Fathers a day. Okay? Now, you know the prayer. She would say the prayer, but she'd have a problem in the middle of the prayer. As we forgive those who trespass against us. She just couldn't say it. She's stuck in this bathroom under these conditions, and she just couldn't say it. She says, if I say that line, I will be lying to God. So she took the line out and continued to pray. Forgive us our trespasses and deliver us from evil. And she'd go on and pray and pray. And then she started to think, wait a minute, these aren't my words. This isn't the prayer that I made up. This is the prayer that Jesus taught us. If I say the line, I feel like I'm going to be lying to God. But if I don't say the line, I feel like I'm denying Jesus. So she put the line back into the prayer, but she amended the prayer as well. As we forgive those who trespass against us, but God, I don't know how to do it. I'm so filled with anger. I can't do this alone. I need your help. Show me how to forgive. And she continued to pray. And in that prayer, she found a renewed understanding of who God is for her. And she was able to ultimately get to that point where she was able to say the line with peace in her heart. She left the bathroom, regained her strength, came to this country and started teaching us about the issues facing people in Rwanda. And she continued to support her family back home. She was particularly interested in raising money for all the orphans left without parents as a result of the genocide. So she would frequently make trips back to Rwanda and be followed by people of the press. And one day she's walking through the village and she sees a man and she runs up to him and puts her arm around him and she calls a photographer over and says, "Come quick, take our picture." And the photographer says, "Sure, what's the deal? Who is this person?" "Well, this is the man whose brother killed my brother." And he just looks at her and says, "And you want me to take your picture?" She says, yes, it's okay. Just take the picture. And in his Western mind, he's saying, it's not okay. Where's the justice? Where's the retribution? But she says, it's okay. Love your enemies and pray for your persecutors. Now, in our day, we probably are a little bit more aware of our enemies than we were years ago. You can't turn on the news without hearing about our enemies, about terrorism in the world, or about other acts of violence in our neighborhoods and our communities. Maybe some of that violence has touched your own lives or lives of those you know and love. Maybe it was a drunk driver who cut short someone's life. Or maybe you know someone who was in the wrong place at the wrong time and in a convenience store during a holdup. There are so many things for us to be worried about, to be fearful of. But a lot of times our enemies are even closer to home. They're closer to our inner circle. I know some people who haven't talked to their parents in decades. I have some friends from colleges that were best buddies, best men at each other's weddings. They ran into a little trouble, haven't spoken to each other since. Or maybe your enemies are in your workplace. That person that competes so hard for the boss's attention or for that next promotion that they'll do anything to make them look good. And often it's at the expense of putting you down. There are bullies everywhere. There are issues in our own families. There are a lot of things where loving becomes a very hard thing for us to do. But that's where the bar is that Jesus set for us. And he didn't expect us to walk that bar alone. Immaculée didn't figure out how to do it alone. She had to enter into prayer and pray for the guidance and the courage and the wisdom to get over the fear and let love take care of everything. And that wasn't passive, submissive prayer where she would just sit in the corner and respond to God. This was argumentative prayer, a prayer where she wrenched her own heart out and put out all of her pain and suffering before the Lord and asked for his help. And that's what we need to do. So as we reflect upon the issues facing us in this reading, and we think about how God has raised the bar for us, we have to go to God and put our concerns about achieving that bar in his hands. And through constant prayer, he will guide us and fill our hearts. Take out the stony hearts and fill them with hearts full of love so that we can share that love with others. And then maybe we can be perfect, just as our Heavenly Father is perfect.